Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Equestrian Tea Time. I'm your host, Isabeau Salas. My co-host is Emma Jenkinson. In this episode, we are going to discuss the Brideless horse show that they just held in the UK, which has sparked a lot of interesting conversations and feedback online on social media from the beginning of the internet. So many years ago, people have been happy to share and post video of their training and their tricks on YouTube and online. Over time, as it's become more popular and more acceptable, more upper level professionals were willing to show their training techniques at home. The past few years, a couple of upper level jumper riders have toured around the ring in the United States without a bridle on. There's a famous track horse, Brideless Wyatt, who worked the track with a neck rope. Various clicker trainers and natural and alternative horsemanship trainers have included bridleless riding as a part of their displays and demonstration over the past few decades. So it's nice to see the idea of bridleless riding crossing over into just this plain old standard, good old fashioned horse show. So Emma and I discuss that and discuss the varying opinions we have encountered online. So thank you for joining us and enjoy. I found another guest for us too. A friend of mine just went through EGALA training.
Ooh,
So
yes.
she will come up
I'm
and
a little
talk.
bit familiar, actually.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm like familiar. My mom's a therapist, and I've actually worked with a couple therapists as the horse handler
Cool.
before.
You have? That's awesome. Let's
and
see.
I love it. It's a very
right.
cool. I think a big point about that subject when you're making, questions is like, it's a really good way to utilize horses and get instructors working without riding and putting that impact on like your lesson horses.
Yes.
Like it could be a really cool cooperative thing with riding programs.
Yes. So we will talk to her name. Her name is Daria, and she is in New Jersey. So let's see. We came up with this topic after we had the that really cool Brideless horse show in the UK.
Yeah.
So see if you agree with this as the general framework. Is the show horse industry fundamentally at odds with horse welfare, or can the two coexist? Does that sound like what our topic is?
I think that is a big one.
That is a big one, yes.
Yeah.
Could narrow that down.
A very broad topic, but I agree. And I think that's what is on a lot of people's minds. Thinking in terms of that Brideless horse show, the notes that I had made were more just geared towards is it okay to compete bridleless? And what were the opposing views and how did it go? Because I see like positive changes and mindset changes happening. I just don't know that the industry's caught up yet. Is how I feel about it. But as to your question, I feel like absolutely it's at odds
the internet
with animal welfare.
On my end. 1 second. Okay, got you. You disappeared for some reason. We're having problems with the internet connection on my end. All right, you're back. I only saw some clips of it. I thought it was really cool that they put it on. My understanding is they were warming up in regular tack and then just pulling the bridle for the class. So what did you think of the whole thing?
As far as being a horse trainer, what I saw was some really happy, unstressed horses, and I would like to see more of that in other horse shows. I don't necessarily think it's an equipment issue, but I think that with the equipment, your horse should be willing and comfortable, and that the horse shows should be more a test of how your horse and yourself conduct yourselves out in public in a stressful situation. I saw a lot calmer horses, and that's what I'd like to see with bridles or not.
Yeah. Mhm. No, definitely for jumpers and for dressage, the horses were a lot more calmer than you would normally see. See a lot of dressage horses ready to jump into their skin, a lot of jumper horses in upper level competition, especially where the riders are wrestling with the reins and the horse a lot. I mean, there are super quiet horses in tack. Western Pleasure, that was the main criticism, right? That the horses were, they had got them too quiet and too compliant. At least with, I mean, with the bridleless, it's, I mean, it does make it look like that you have to train the horse so that they are going to be willing to cooperate. Now, some of the critics, I don't know if you saw the post with the neck band that had the tacks on it. Did you see
Oh my
that
God,
picture?
yeah. I was like, oh,
Yes.
that's our first go. That was our first idea after the bridalist competition.
Yes. Well,
I
I think that
just
they're,
like, this is the point, is that we're always missing the moral point with the equipment or the horse
yeah,
training.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think part of their, I mean, yeah, that I'll have to post a link to a picture of that because it's a flat strap with, I don't know, tacks or nails that go towards the horse so that when you pull on the neck strap, the pointy parts dig right into the horse's neck. And I mean, the thing is that people could use that kind of equipment at home to produce what looks like a really light performance. So I think there's definitely an issue that even if the horses are bridleless at a horse show, we still don't know what folks are doing at home. What people pointed out that I liked a lot was that there being no equipment, a lot more of the spectators were focusing a lot more on the horses' behavior, and that they were very interested to see the horses appeared to be listening to the riders more and more responsive and more communicative. I mean, there's a huge difference between somebody cantering up to a jumper fence, wrestling on the reins, and some of those really impressive, you know, they put some really impressive headgear on jumper horses sometimes, and with the rider pulling for all their worth versus these horses cantering up to a fence, you're not wrestling. You can't be. I mean, you could potentially pull on the neck rope, but there's nothing like the
Yeah.
rider interference that can happen in that when you have that much bigger, much more dramatic equipment. I mean, the if we don't want to pick on a sport, but Matt mentioned another sport that uses really large equipment. The barrel racing people, you know, some of the headsets, we would have to have a side-by-side competition as to who uses more, shall we say it's significant or heinous or horrifying gear on horse's head between jumper riders and barrel riders, because they both use some really substantial restraint devices on the horse's head and in their mouth to try to control the fact that they need a lot of power from the horse. But since the horse is kind of overwhelmed, then the riders are forced having to wrestle them back with this really huge equipment. The dressage performance always interests me very much because it's interesting to watch the horses' headsets. You know, the horses do kind of naturally, their necks do go behind the vertical at times. And I don't know whether that's a reflection of the fact that the horse is possibly doing the maneuvers with the less than ideal muscle usage. You know, even without a bit, maybe they're still engaging themselves in a way that they're going to curl. But I found the dressage to be even more interesting than the jumping in terms of watching the horses go through a variety of neck positions. The dressage riders are, they're almost having to do a lot more, balance the horse laterally, left, right, a little bit more forward, a little bit more back, no take the canter side to the left. And I can see some of them struggling without the bit, you know, to get that kind of communication with the horse when they only had the neck rope.
Yeah. And that is the argument I hear from anyone who has issues with like bitless or bridleless riding, is like, there's just so many aids we're using. How
Mhm.
do we train those when we change equipment? And it's doable, but there's so many reasons that you might want to use a bridle or a bitless bridle or a neck rope. And so I would love to see it allowed in competition. At the same time, like, to play the devil's advocate a little bit, the argument as far as Safety goes with bitless and bridleless is that, especially with jumping, if you get into a sticky situation, how do you reset your horse? How do you communicate in a dangerous situation to stop your horse, intentionally refuse a jump because you know it's about to go sideways? How do you, these things, how do we really deeply communicate with the horse in a dangerous situation has been the fear.
Mhm.
But I think the answer is that you have no business putting your horse in a horse show or that situation if they're too nervous to listen to your cues, and then you should have the allowance to use these different aids the way you want. We don't all train our horses the same, especially para riders, right? We need to change things up. So why can't we do that for the horse? But it's a fear of not having the horse's head restrained if they take off or something like that. And they are herd animals. So we've always just said better safe than sorry. We don't want horses running loose, but that is clearly not what would happen with this. And I think to make it doable, we would maybe have to separate shows or classes into these things to make it fair to judge these horses against each other. But I was wondering what your perspective on all of that was with this recent horse show judging you were learning about, because I know that learning more about like how the horse is being judged, really changed my perspective on what could be done in horse shows or not, and about the safety perspective, but also like how do we judge these horses against each other. So yeah, I wanted to see your
Gotcha.
perspective on
Yeah,
that.
so I think it's fairly straightforward with the jumpers because it is, at least in the United States, I believe it is allowed now. Like there are no restrictions on headgear in the jumpers, and there are people who have competed bridleless. So for jumpers, I don't think it's that complicated, especially if you're just dropping the bridle right as you go into the ring. For
Mm-hmm.
dressage, it definitely puts a bigger, makes it trickier on the judges. Schooling shows are already, at least the years that I was in New Jersey, pretty generous about letting people try stuff out. They were fine with people doing bitless bridles. You know, they want people to get out there and participate and have a safe experience. And so honestly, if they can let you do a bitless, I think if you want to go with a neck rope, that should be fine. The problem that I saw at that level was people being pushed. I did see a young jumper rider in a class once who I got the impression was possibly being prompted by the adults. And she looked a little out of control and couldn't quite stop her horse. So I might suggest that this be an adults and above only thing, because kids are really motivated by exciting, thrilling things that they see, and they don't really understand. They don't know the risk that they're taking. So I might, ask that at the schooling show level that the judges allow us to start playing around with the bit list, but I would possibly say 18 and older, because I have seen young people be pushed into it. I've heard a young jumper rider
Yes.
kind of desperately saying, please slow, whoa, 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 in a desperate way that made me think that they didn't really have control over their horse there. Yes, the
Yeah.
judging thing is very interesting. That was on my list. So the judges' role in industry accountability. So if we talk about the judges, when the judging symposium was very interesting. They have a list of criteria that they apply, and that's kind of it. If we want them to judge dressage bridleless, then they would have to come up with a whole new format for the criteria by which they judge things. So my guess is that's going to cause them some problems.
Yeah. Do you see any trouble judging the dressage with some people using bits, some people using double bits and double bridles, and some people using bitless at the higher levels?
At the higher levels, my expectation is going to be that those judges ought to be able to deal with it.
Right.
I think that it's probably a lot to ask of schooling show judges and lower level judges who are having or who are faced with having to be cheerleaders for the introductory level of the sport and try to promote and try to help people learn to do things. But I mean, the lower level judges are under a tremendous amount of pressure in terms of people who are, at least in the United States, people are expecting support and not criticism.
Yeah. And then, like, the only thing, I can't see any problems or any accommodation that would need to be made between like needing a neck rope, but I would love to see just bitless and bits allowed at schooling competitions. And maybe if it's only snaffle bits, then there's only side pulls allowed, because a hackamore is essentially an action bit, like a double bridle bit or a shank bit. So that, I could see not allowing certain types of hackamores or something like that, because they, are not like a snaffle bit if we're comparing the two. But I think that schooling show people could do that. And the only reason being is that, like, a lot of schooling programs, we don't use bits a lot. And so the horse is going to act a lot different with a bit that day. Some horses just don't like bits or have mouth issues. And so I would just love to see that. And then I think at the higher levels, it would be really cool to allow bitless along with those other things, because, as you said, the judges should be at a certain level. We're giving all this time to these classes and really watching. And I think it would change the climate over there if some people are using bits and raise this, or not using bits, because it would raise the standard of the, happiness we're seeing with the horses, and allow more people in if they say don't want to use a double bridle.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think that it could just really change the climate. And at the same time, we have to realize that horse show judges are not judging the horse's demeanor and how happy their, body,
Yeah.
they're not focused on the horse's emotions. They're
Mhm.
focused on the movements and judging in a specific way. So to change the culture, I think it would just be good to individually be able to make these choices.
Mhm. Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems we're stuck a little bit in a chicken and an egg here. This was another topic when it comes to the painful practicalities of horse shows and judging and stuff. Is that it's really the larger industries that have made all these systems and all these rules. Having volunteered at a lot of dressage shows and having, as a volunteer, witnessed quite a few really sketchy things. These were before smartphones, and people might be worried about getting in trouble for these things. The whole show horse industry is in service of these top level competitors. Um, and they really do feel like it's all about them, and they have no problem throwing their weight around at horse shows. And it seems like a lot of us who want to do things, try to do things differently with bitless and with neck ropes and with clicker training and all these kinds of things, are, don't carry enough financial weight to make much difference in the industry. So that's one of the big things that I think about when I'm thinking about these things. When I've both worked professionally and volunteered at the many shows that I have, how clearly the peons do not matter compared to the folks at the top of the food chain. Kendian Farms online horse shows and these other online horse shows provide us a format where we can start to play with these ideas without having to attempt to move the titanic infrastructure that is, in the United States, the USEF and the FEI. So I do really like these smaller, the online horse shows as a place for us to be able to get started with that kind of thing and see how we can make it work. And now my AirPods have decided to disconnect. I'm not having much luck with the technology today. The technology is not my friend. All right, the AirPods are back on. At least I can hear. So show
That's good.
environment. Another topic that I brought up in my research for us to talk about was the show environment. I've personally groomed and worked at some horse shows where the stabling was just horrendous. We were in a tropical climate and they had these low ceiling buildings and this metal roof was literally a few feet from your head, radiating down, astonishing heat. We weren't allowed to have fans because the buildings weren't rated for the electrical load. At the same time, I've known some horses who really love horse shows, who really they love activity, they love stuff. They hate hanging out in the barnyard or even in a 20-acre field. They find that unspeakably boring, and they really do thrive on going out to the hunt or going to the race or going to a horse show. They like to horse watch just like the way that people like to people watch. But then you hear constantly people online asking, what can I give my horse to keep him calm at the horse show? He's great at home. And then we get to the horse show and he gets upset or he won't drink water or he's really spooky. So there's definitely plenty of horses who don't like shows.
Yeah.
How should we think about that? What are the welfare issues when you've got people who want to show horses and horses that don't want to go to shows?
I mean, if it's not a life and death issue, but sometimes it is. Some of us are still literally depend on our horses for survival and vice versa. It's
Mhm.
just true. So I think in that case, maybe you have to go, and that is really very much the rodeo barrel racing culture and the American dream of being able to make real money off of one horse and a sport and a partnership. So I get it. And sometimes it is financially like life or death, and these animals need to work and we need to work to make things work. But I think that high level competition and the English shows, I mean, there's no money to even be made. So why go?
Mm, yeah.
There's no support for even students. We're losing scholarship programs. We're losing horse show teams. There's literally nowhere to go unless you are fully funded and at the very top. And
Mm.
so in that case, I think if you have the means to just survive and then you do horse shows for fun, then you should find a horse that wants to do that with you, or you can do online shows.
Yeah, yeah. I see so many lesson programs rely on horse shows as the exciting goal that their students are going towards. And for a long time, I've wished we could have a different exciting goal for students to go towards. Some of us really like horses, and people will get a few horses and buy a property and learn how to take care of the horses themselves. And they'll find that really enjoyable and really fulfilling, and they'll really enjoy learning everything that they learn as they go through that process over a few decades. But I know other people who just, if they're not getting ready for a horse show, there's just no point for them to go to the barn. If there's no brass ring or no dangled carrot, if there's no horse show series, if there's no summer show series, they can't find a reason to go. So I think a lot of our business structure is really based on having that brass ring and having that carrot to dangle in front of people to give them a
Yeah.
goal.
I wonder if we are setting ourselves up for disaster by thinking of this industry and selling it to people as a sport and that these are livestock. But really, in reality, these days, if you get a horse, it is more that they're a pet. And you have to think of it that way first. And if we could just enjoy them as pets and hobbies, but the goal is doing something with this animal and using them not as a vehicle. Like us as real horsemen who have spent our lives know that horse showing should be the goal. Like it's a fun goal to have, but it's not there are pets, and their welfare needs to come first, and they're not vehicles. build this horsemanship and partnership to then maybe be able to go and like show off that partnership at a horse show. But there's a disconnect between what we experience as professionals and like what amateurs and our clients experience. And it's so tough. I don't know.
It is so tough. No, and the disconnect between amateurs and professionals, that is a very good point. What I find a lot is people getting horses, and even if they want them to be pets, they don't want them to be an intensive learning project. No matter what they do, they purchase the horse kind of the way you purchased a blender or a car or a lawnmower. You expect there to be a little bit of setup, but then you expect it to just kind of work. You don't expect it to be a decades long process of being humbled repeatedly. And because a lot of people don't particularly enjoy being humbled repeatedly. And, once they find out that owning a horse can be like that, their enthusiasm dwindles a lot. Or they just refuse to believe it. They keep having another trainer or trying to switch things around, but they keep trying to find some way that, having the horse and keeping the horse, not even progressing, but just keeping both you and the horse safe and happy and working together without either of you getting upset or injured or scared is possibly going to be a lot harder than they thought. And they didn't sign up for that.
Yeah. And things just happen to our horses or us that, like my mare, I've got one lesson horse and we've been out for 4 months because even though she's technically healthy and rideable, she's having some behavior issues because of this cancer. And then she's fine and it's slow growing. And so they wanted to do like 6 months of rounds of testing. So I'm out of work for however long, right? And these things just happen all the time. One bad farrier visit and I'm out of work, and all my students also don't get to ride their horse. So I think the focus needs to change a little bit on what lesson programs provide you, right? Because if I could just get my students to keep coming out to work on horsemanship, that'd be great. But instead, I'm hanging on as long as I can without any lesson horse. But I can't own 5 or 6 to make other people happy, especially when they treat it like they go to the gym more than they come to ride.
Good point. So, yep. Good point. Yep.
And something I see a lot is this need to control something in your life, and you come to a riding program to do that. And these are the students I see who really want a horse and would or often want to lease my horses so they can be left alone to work with the horse, because sometimes they think if they were just left alone or they owned the horse, then everything would go great. And it's just something about my horse and the instructor that's the problem. But
oh, really?
They find out 6 months later, once they get a horse, that these are just the realities. It's harder than it looks. And when we're giving these anecdotes of like, it's really hard, we're trying to give warnings, but people ultimately often do what they want to do. But a lot of times I see it as more like they want control of the situation. And they think once they own the horse and have control over the tack and the farrier and the vet and the feed program and can, get the instructor off their back and just go ride alone, that everything will work out. And in reality, if you're going to get a horse, you should plan on taking lessons and continue to take lessons. Like all of us professionals do, right?
Yes. I haven't had people say that to me directly, but you're right. That has happened in the past. I just didn't quite recognize that what was going on. We can also talk about training and age. What age is it suitable to start horses showing or training? There are still vets that I listen to a bunch of different vet podcasts, and vets speak really differently about this. I've heard vets say that the horse's body has to be loaded with a certain kind of work at a young age in order for its nervous system to be programmed to develop robustly so that it can perform that job, so that the horses really
Yeah.
do need to be started at 2 doing something like what the job is. And then on the other end, we get a lot of people saying 5 to 7 years old, you shouldn't be sitting on your horse until its skeleton is formed then. So
Mm.
now
Yeah.
I'm more confused than I was 10 years ago. what's
I
a
mean,
what's a good time?
yeah, it varies, and there's some stipulations. It matters the breed of the horse. We know that certain breeds, like knees and backs, fuse at 5 to 7 years old, and some don't. We know that horses that have had a hard time in life at a young age might stop growing and then finish growing later. I've seen that in a lot of Mustangs because their bodies are smart, and sometimes they have growth spurts well past when they should have because they were experiencing such scarcity when they were rounded up or at the facility. So it varies. I think it has to go by case basis.
Mhm.
Thoroughbreds, they mature much faster than other horses. That is true. We know this from x-rays. It doesn't mean they should be ridden at 1 year old. So what I'd really like to see is, if you're a real horse person and you're going to have horses throughout your life and start some horses, it would be really great to get x-rays and kind of further this research for us. But if you get a horse that's bred, then the breeder's going to know when they tend to mature and what they want done. And then you have to think about like types of horses. There's cart horses, and they're really just not meant to be ridden in the same way. They can be, but those horses you probably want to start a lot later. And then as far as the research on impacts and strengthening bones, you can do that just fine with like putting a saddle on their back. Um,
Mhm.
and then there's just a lot of the issue, even though it seems like a different issue, is really that just horse owners don't work their horses up to things and keep things in
Mhm.
reasonable time limits. If we were going to sit and do a pony ride on this young horse, that's way different than even getting on and off that horse a million times and bouncing around like this. Like, I don't want to see their bodies swaying. And if they are, we've got like a weight issue. We've got, the horse shouldn't be taking the max loads at the beginning, and then they should be worked up in a maintenance program, right? So like you start with a few minutes and you really work your way up. And so I don't know. I think there's a big disconnect. Like today I saw a TikTok of a lady who, maybe it was a TikTok or like a YouTube video, but I was just checking this person out, and she's a barrel racer. And she's lovely with her horses and everything, and they're well trained, and she's casual about it. She's an amateur. But what I saw was she's like, I just had my baby and I'm just getting back in the saddle. So we're going to a barrel race this weekend. And I was just like, oof. And then she goes on to say, like, yeah, I've ridden like twice and had my horse back in work for a week. So like, how do you think that's gonna go? Just like us, like we need to be worked up into these things. And if you looked at how like Brazilian barrel racers are training their horses, the big barrel racers are training their horses, or how race horses are worked up to races and maintained, it's very different than what we're doing, because we're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's casual and I just want to hop on for a second. If it's casual and you just want to hop on for a second, then you're going to need like a horse that's not the horse you're starting as a colt, right? Those
Yeah.
horses need lots of time, slow starts. And I know I still haven't even answered your question, but for me, the range is 3 to 5 years old is when I like to start riding and work your way up. I think a lot of people do 2 years old. I think some horses, it's from a behavioral perspective, it's good to get them going a little bit, get them used to it. But really, if you look at like dressage trainers, breeding programs, and English riding, that the horses that have to get certified in like dressage jumping, take like the Frisian breeding, they have to be, if they want to be a breeding stallion, they have to be able to jump, do dressage and stuff. They don't start looking at them till they're like 7, 8 years old, maybe 5 if you're really lucky. And they start these horses off just so slow, and starting them at pulling them out of the field and starting them at 3 really doesn't seem to affect them as long as they've been like raised and handled, which I see a lot of Western riders fearing, and that's why they get on their horse so quick. Um, or a lot of times it's like I gotta do this for a living, and I gotta get these horses going. And I think there's a way to do it safely, and I think there's a really wrong way to do it. And I think that a lot of people miss the conditioning and exercise part of it for their horses. If your horse is fit, it's going to be a lot different. So,
No, I think you brought up a really big point there. Yeah. So a lot of these professional programs that are maybe they're starting roping horses or cutting horses at 2 or 3, they're also in huge programs where they do this a lot and they're very good at it. And they take conditioning the animals at a very high professional level when you compare with somebody who's an amateur and has 1 horse. It is like trying to compare apples to oranges. Is very different. And the conditioning beforehand, that's an excellent point. There's one lady I follow, this Lucky Devil, I forget if she's in New Zealand or Australia, and she rides her horses around and brings other horses loose. And she had one of her mares had a foal, and that foal followed them loose on the trails, going over trees, swimming in the ocean with dolphins, and getting to do all of these conditioning activities that most young horses. So even by the time she did get that horse started, that horse had tremendous out of the ring over rough terrain conditioning that nobody, even if you wait until they're 5 years old, your horse is probably not going to get that. Most people's horses are not going to get the kind of conditioning like that horse did.
yeah. And then I
like
would
that.
like to point, as a pair rider and someone who's had to get real creative with like maintaining my lesson horses as riding horses when I straight up don't ride, you know? There's a way to do anything if you really put your mind to it. And what I've found is that if you don't have tack and a rider, you can do everything with that horse and get all those cues done. And like you said, these horses should be getting exercise and work. It's just they don't need to go in little circles. It's bad for them. They don't need to be ridden. They need exercise and training.
All right, I got you back here. I think we're gonna have to wrap up just because my internet keeps dropping. This is so very annoying. We had fitting him out too. So the last I heard from you was saying that yes, that the horses don't need to be ridden in circles and they need to be conditioned. I can offer one good free resource. Jack Ballou has a bunch of free stuff online that offers pull work and all kinds of conditioning and proprioception work for folks who don't live in Australia or New Zealand and can't swim their horses with the dolphins. For the rest of us, before my internet cuts us off again and tortures us, is there anything else that you want to add here before we wrap up?
Yeah. Good question. Anything? No, there was like a topic that I thought of while we were talking, and hopefully it comes back to me. It was like related.
Okay, it's all
there is
right.
something I would like to mention, and that is,
Go ahead.
and maybe we can do an episode on this, have you heard about them? They're gonna shoot all the Brumbies this week.
I heard something
They're
popped up
focusing
that
on shooting pregnant mares. I've never heard of any sort of
excellent. That's all
Mustang
right.
management that's that brutal.
Yes.
And they're only
Yes.
taking comments from locals, but
Uh-huh.
I do have their address if you'd like to send them some international mail. This has been going on since like 2000, and I have
Okay.
compiled quite a bit of information on the subject.
Or I could I'll just put it in the notes.
Yeah, well, I'll find it.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I offer my lessons, virtual training, Patreon.
I came up with some other good ideas. We could talk about in a podcast in the future. Is social media good or bad for the horse industry, for students and for professionals? That would be a really good
I have
topic.
my own thoughts about AI, and I'm
Okay, cool.
setting up
Okay.
this business too. So
All right, cool. We can do we'll plan that as a topic. And I have a friend who I'm supposed to interview this week. She went through NIGAL certification program. So
that'll be
hopefully I'll talk to.
cool.
Yes, she will be very interesting to talk to. And let me go before the internet dumps us again, seeing as how it's
Okay.
not being very nice. So
All right.
yes, thank you very much for meeting me today. Stay cool out there in the hot part of the country.
We'll try. It's not
All righty. Take care.
good. Take care. Bye.
Bye.